who is the director of the center here, and for their gracious hospitality in allowing us to use the center today. I think if you have been in the town of Sevierville lately, especially the past few weeks, you know that the courthouse is a little difficult to get to with the road construction and the barricades around. So it's just kind of nice that we were able to meet here today and have a place this nice to have a meeting. So I'm going to begin today with invocation, and I'm going to ask Don Walker.
You do that and I'll go over there.
Father, we're thankful for the day you have made, and we rejoice and we are glad. We're grateful to be able to gather here with good folks, and grateful to be able to gather here today with an opportunity to learn. As it's been pointedly pointed out, when you're through learning, you're through. Father, we should endeavor to continue to press on the upward way to reach new heights every day. I pray that you'll bless our time together today. Pray that you'll bless this organization as we continue to strive and work to keep history alive and pass it down to the next generation. Hear our cry, O God. We sincerely offer up our hearts to you in the name of our Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you. And I would like to ask you now to stand for pledge to the flag. We just can't see the flag out the window, so we'll use this. No disrespect for thinking as it is. Salute the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I don't see Phyllis in here today, so we'll have a reading of the minutes of our last meeting. But we will have just a few words about our treasurer and membership report. Hey, Jim, thank you.
Good afternoon, and good news. We continue to grow our treasury from the lows of 2017. Our treasury is now back up to numbers that you see 2012, and eventually we hope to get back to our high numbers of 2014. Our total cash and other funds on hand as of the end of October amount to $86,650. We do have some outgoing expenses for the rest of the year. We have 2 journals that will be printed and mailed between now and the end of the year. And but we continue to have new members join us, and that leads into the membership. And for those of that you can see, here's a bar graph. I love graphs, and it shows that things are going up. There'll be a copy of this available where you can inspect later if you wish. And this little chart shows our membership, and our membership is growing, and we're now almost at back to we're actually above 2013 levels, which is great. We're growing there, and our membership is up to 326 dues-paying members. So this is the ones that actually help keep us going. We have memberships that like for the libraries and things like that. So our total number of membership count is about 450, which is approaching all-time highs. Any question on either of those? Good.
Thank you. Thank you. A few announcements. First of all, at the end of the presentation today, we're going to have a very short business meeting, I hope, and it begins to carry on. It'll just be later. We'll do it another time. But I'm going to pass out copies of the bylaws changes that we're proposing today. And if you remember, please take one and hold on to it, look at it, look over it. You can read the changes that have been made. I think what's being changed is in red and the rewriting is in blue. I think you'll find these bylaws a little streamlined, but even more specific in areas where we felt like we relaxed in our running of the organization. These have all been passed by the board of directors of the organization, and we hope it's just something that we'll look at and improve. Jim?
Two things, there are already copies of those that have been passed around, so those may be extras if anyone needs
So
one.
these are
In addition to that, there's also black only that shows what the version looks like after the fact, if you don't want to worry with trying to figure out what's red and what's blue and what's still there. So those are passed, those have already been passed out as well.
On a sad note, I'm going to pass a card around. Yesterday, the husband of Betty Best, who we in the organization know, she gave the presentation for the past year. So her husband Herman passed away yesterday. And so we're going to pass this card around, and they're having the services for Herman this afternoon. They're in Maryville, and I brought the obituary. If you need to see that, well, you can see that and find out where it is at the time. So I'm just going to start this around. If you'd like to sign it, please do.
Randall, that's also on our Facebook page.
Okay. A few other announcements need to be made. I'll try to do it as quick as I can. I'd like to recognize and thank Jim Schuler, and I don't see Jim here either, but Jim has served this organization for around 30 years, and except for a couple of years, he's been our editor for the last 24 years. And so, you know, you can't imagine the commitment it takes to do that unless you're there and have done that. And so I'd like to really give him a round of applause, even for acknowledging. Please tell him that we are very indebted to his service. He resigned this past summer, and we'll welcome now April Fowler. April, would you stand, please? Okay. Yes, thank you. April has consented to complete the present term of Jim as editor, and so we want to also give her a hand and welcome her. Journal editing is real work, and if you don't believe that, ask an English teacher or someone else that does any editing, and they can tell you. And you have to be busy for that as well. So, thank you. And after the presentation, we'd like for the members to stay around for a few minutes. We're going to try to vote on these bylaws, and then we need to either elect or re-elect some officers on the board that are due for re-election. So if you can do that, please do that. And so, the only other thing I'll say is that after the presentation, we would like for you to stay for refreshments. And please let's recognize Donna Stanton for all the work she's done laying out this table back here. This looks great. I don't remember it looking like this, Donna. So thank you.
At our regular meetings, there's 2 tables. This one's just kind of shrunk down. So
Yeah, before you pulled it off. Thank you. Well, this time I want to recognize our speaker for today, which I know you've been waiting for. And so today's speaker is Mr. Bill Quinn. I'm going to just read the biography because, you know, I don't want to make any mistakes. I don't want to make any omissions. So Bill Quinn was born and raised in Dallas, North Carolina. Graduated from Western Carolina University with a BA degree in political science and a minor in history. After college, he was drafted into the U.S. Army during the Vietnam War and served in the Signal Corps in South Korea. Following his discharge, he was employed by Duke Energy Corporation, retiring after 32 years. From 1981 to 83, he taught night history courses at Peacock Community College in Charlotte, North Carolina. His wife Sylvia, he and his wife Sylvia have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. Very nice. And after retiring, they moved to a farm in the Del Rio area where they had horses, cattle, and chickens. And being a descendant of 11 Confederate soldiers, Bill joined the Sons of Confederate Veterans in 1996. In March 2014, along with other local SCV members, he helped organize the Major James T. Huff camp in Newport and was elected their commander. He's written several papers on the war between the states, including History of the Confederacy, which is published in our own journal, and also in Southern Historical Review. He gives lectures to schools, civic groups, and other groups like ours. And also, he is still very active in SVC camps, and he gives most of his talks on topics dealing with the war between the states. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome Bill Quinn. Bill, as you can see, we're very informal, so you just, you have the floor.
Thank you, Randall. I appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Beautiful place. I see I'm on camera, so I guess I better smile. Yeah, Randall called me about 2 weeks ago, and I think he had something to do with that, asking me to come over, and as I understand it, lead a discussion of the Battle of Fair Garden. Which is interesting because I just finished writing a text for a book this past year on the battle of the war in Central East Tennessee. Hadn't been published yet, supposed to come out first of the year. Luckily most of it was still fresh in my mind. I think probably that, I don't know, I know when I talk to historical organizations like the SCV and the DAR and SAR and so forth, we usually have some pretty good historians in the crowd. So, but then again, that might not everybody know the full story leading up to the Battle of Fair Garden. So if you don't mind, I'd like to take a few minutes and kind of back up a few months to say September of 1863. Up until then, from spring of 61, summer of 61, up through September of 63, this part of the country was in full control pretty much of the Confederate States of America. Lincoln had been urging his War Department to come in and take this part of the country. He was very sympathetic towards it. He had even financially backed the bridge burners in 61. Everybody familiar with the bridge burners? Okay, burnt 5 out of the 9 bridges from Bristol to Bridgeport, Alabama. 5 of them were hung for it. But anyway, he financially backed them, pledged military support for it, but for some reason Sherman didn't come and help like he was supposed to. But anyway, in 63, he finally talked the War Department into sending some troops into East Tennessee. Burnside, Ambrose Burnside, the Major General who was commander of the Department of Ohio, was dispatched down here with a little over 15,000 troops. Arrived here around the 3rd of September and immediately started taking over the area. There was 4,000 Confederates in Knoxville. They didn't take long to disperse them. Then he sent out parties on up to Bull's Gap, Rogersville, and other places to secure the area. So by October, he pretty much had control of the valley here, all the way up to the Virginia line. Long about that, 2 or 3 weeks later, there was something else occurred just down the road here a ways, just south of Chattanooga, at a little creek called Chickamauga. Lieutenant General Longstreet, James Longstreet, was dispatched from the Army of Northern Virginia to come over and help Braxton Bragg. Braxton Bragg and Davis, they were old-time buddies going back to West Point, and so Braxton had cried that he needed some help, that he was about to be overcome, and so He sent Longstreet with most of his corps except for one division from the Army of Northern Virginia. Came down to Chickamauga just in time to save the battle. Longstreet is actually accredited with the Confederates winning that battle, and his North Carolina troops got the farthest with the mostest. There's no saying where I come from. North Carolina troops were the first at Big Bethel, the farthest at Gettysburg and Chickamauga, and the last to stack arms at Appomattox. I'm proud of it because I had ancestors just about every one of those places. Now, Braxton Bragg wasn't easy to get along with. Longstreet clashed with him pretty early. Of course, Nathan Bedford Forrest threatened to kill him, and he didn't do it behind his back neither. Forrest didn't mince words. But anyway, not many of his supporters got along with him. Longstreet clashed with him fairly early on because of him dragging his feet when the federal troops went into Chattanooga and built up their entrenchments. You know, he had a chance to have captured them, but he didn't. But anyway, in a communication with Davis, he was kind of wanting to know what he should do with Longstreet. Davis suggested, well, send him up to Knoxville and take Knoxville back. So that's what he did. So Longstreet leaves out the 4th of November, headed to Knoxville with about 15,000 troops. But then Burnside's, he's been reinforced some. He's up to about 26,000. Longstreet heads up the valley. He's supposed to have another 3,500 troops that didn't get sent like they were supposed to. Bushrod Johnson and his division finally joined him during the siege of Knoxville, the Fort Sanders siege. That didn't go off too well. The Unionists in the area were floating supplies and food and stuff down the river. And at night, the Federals under Burnside would get the food in. And so they held up pretty good through the siege. Okay. But now Grant has taken over the Union Army of Tennessee. And he's in Chattanooga now. He sends his old buddy Sherman to reinforce Burnside and end the siege, 25,000 troops. So Longstreet, he finally said, well, he knew Sherman was on the way, he's got to do something, so he went ahead and attacked on the 28th, 29th of November. It didn't go too good. They thought the trench around Fort Sanders was 5 feet deep. It was actually 9 feet deep, and it rained the night before and turned to sleet. His men got in the trench there on that west salient. They couldn't scale the trench, and they just like shooting ducks in the pond. So he aborted the fight after a few hours. Burnside, which had been an old friend of Longstreet's before the war, he called the truce, let him get his casualties, his wounded and dead out of the trench, and so the fighting stopped. Well, Longstreet sat around for a couple of days trying to figure out what he should do, and then the word came that Sherman was as far as Loudon, so he decides to pack it in and head up the valley. He goes as far as Rogersville and encamps there. He's still just trying to make up his mind whether to head on back to Virginia and join back up with Lee, or come back and try to retake Knoxville. Well, Sherman, Burnside thought he wasn't leaving the state, going on out of the state. So he sent Sherman back, said, I don't need you, but he did keep 10,000 of his troops. He kept one large division of it. So Longstreet was thinking real hard about going back and taking Knoxville. But in the meantime, since he didn't leave, he was encamped at Rogersville. Burnside felt a lot of pressure from coming from Washington to get him out of the valley. So he sends Sturgis up the river and to try to dislodge him. The first battle at Bean Station, The cavalry got way in advance of the infantry, and Shackelford had the cavalry, 4,000 of them, and they just about got surrounded at Bean Station. He did manage to escape. Longstreet was furious. He broke down two of his division commanders, Evander Laws and Lafayette McLaws. He broke them down and had them in court-martial because he didn't feel like they fulfilled their duty. Matter of fact, Evander Laws was pretty much exiled down to South Carolina. He never did see Longstreet again. After the war, McLaws and Longstreet kind of made up, and McLaws did come back under his command later on. Okay, moving along. Bean Station. They run Shackelford back to the infantry. He gets back with Sturgis's full command, and they call a halt to the fighting. Longstreet did, pulled his people back, and then the next thing happens. The Union set up a base at Strawberry Plains on the north side of the river, northwest side of the river. They had to rebuild the bridge because one of their cavalry commanders had swooped down in the valley back in July. Sanders, as a matter of fact, is his name. He's the one the fort was named after. Fort Sanders, up until then it was Fort Loudon. So Fort Sanders was named after a colonel in the Union Army that was killed just a few days before Longstreet did a full attack on Fort Sanders. And, okay, so they set their base up there at Strawberry Plains, and Foster, Major General Foster, is in command now. He's relieved Burnside, and so he sent cavalry over to kind of check on Longstreet and make sure he's not coming any farther towards Knoxville. And as things developed, they wind up coming together at what was called Mossy Creek in those days. We know it now as Jefferson City. And there was a pretty good battle there that lasted about 3 days. And that gentleman right back there, the name of Eli Lilly, saved it for the Union Army. Although they were outnumbered 2-1, the Confederates were just about to win that battle. Lilly, he was pretty sharp. Could be a future pharmacist. He set his cannons up. There was a conical hill there, and he pulled his cannons up right just across the top of the hill, just where they could shoot over the hill. And he had a artillery battle going with Confederate artillery, but they couldn't hit him because of the hill. You know, when a cannon goes off, it recoils. It would go down the hill. They'd swap it out, reload it, push it up just enough to where they could shoot over the top of the hill. And he fired 512 rounds in just a few hours. And he stopped the Confederate charge. So he saved the Battle of Mossy Creek. The Confederates pulled back to Talbot. Longstreet's actually got his main headquarters up at Russellville. There's a house up there now that's a museum. And that was where he had his headquarters. Okay. Coming up next, Dandridge. The Union Army moves into Dandridge about this is on the end of January now, along about the 14th of January. And also on the 14th of January, there's something happened over here in Sevier and then into Cobb County that's pretty, well, we think it's kind of significant, but we never had any good battles over Cobb County. But anyway, Zebulon Vance, who was governor of North Carolina, had a brother named Robert B. Vance, and he was a general in the Confederate Army responsible for the division of Western North Carolina. He gets orders to come across the mountains and kind of keep things stirred up down in the Sevier, Blount, Cobb County area. So he comes across the mountain. He came the hard way, came across Newfound Gap, and they wasn't hardly a road there then. It was just a path. had to lower the cannons down, or rode them some places and so forth. But anyway, he got over here, and on the 13th, he gets into Sevier County, upper end of Sevier County. The Union Army's sitting up there at Dandridge, and they're bringing supplies in. Well, he captures a supply train. And he, by the way, has met up with the Thomas's Legion, so he's got a pretty good force at that time. Well, after he captures the supply train, he sends Walker and Thomas back to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg. And he just has about 40 men with him to escort these wagons to drive them and so forth. And he starts back through Jones Cove that way and is going to take them back to Asheville, going through the new toll road that goes through Catalina. Well, he gets to just to Cosby Creek there, and he is supposed to be met by Lieutenant Colonel Henry out of Walker's brigade, but he don't show up. He was supposed to bring a couple artillery pieces as well as some infantry, and so he decides to kind of camp there for the rest of the afternoon waiting on Henry to get there. Well, Henry don't make it. The Union sent, I'm trying to think of his name now, escapes me, I'll think of it in a minute maybe. But anyway, the Union sends the 15th Pennsylvania. They got about 150 troopers. They catch up with him there at Cosby Creek, just on the west side of the creek, about 200 yards off of the road there behind Schultz's mill. And it's a pretty short battle. They called them napping. Vance didn't even put out pickets. So the battle lasted maybe 15, 20 minutes. The whole bunch was captured. All the supplies was recaptured. And Robert Vance spent the rest of the war in Fort Delaware, POW camp up on the Delaware River. He's lucky he was a general, because that next summer was when the Memorial 600 took place, when the Union took 600 officers, Confederate officers, out of Fort Delaware and put them in the hold of a ship, sailed them down to Charleston, and used them as a human shield against the Charleston batteries. A lot of them didn't make it down. Some of them died in the hold of the ship. There's 13 buried down at Pulaski, Georgia. So anyway, if he'd been a colonel, he'd probably been on that ship. Okay, Dandridge is building up. From about the 16th through the 19th, you have the Battle of Dandridge. The Union forces, they get scared on the 9th to the 18th that they're going to get swamped, and so they pull out. Fighting had kind of gone back and forth. There wasn't any clear victory either way, but by the evening of the 18th, Longstreet had the upper hand. He had established good defensive positions along the ridges, and if anybody knows Longstreet, that's where he likes to be. He likes to fight in the trenches. He likes to be attacked. So they pull this.
I'd just like to point out that Buffalo, the number of troops were involved in that, but it could have been one of the biggest battles of the war.
Oh, Dandridge?
If you had pulled out.
Yep.
Tens of thousands.
Well, let's see. Longstreet by then had close to 20,000. Sturgis had at least that many, so you're talking 45,000 troops.
That was real close to me.
Yep. Well, anyway, they pulled out all the way back to Strawberry Plains. They crossed the river and burned the bridge behind them. This is the second time they burned it. They all learned to quit burning bridges behind them. So they get back to Strawberry Plains, and then they start moving their base camp back to Knoxville. They desert Strawberry Plains and go back to Knoxville. Foster sends Sturgis up the south side of the river, has him cross the river there at Knoxville and go up the south side into Sevier County, because he heard word that the Confederates were starting to forge over there in the Sevier County side of the river. So now we're setting up for the Battle of Fair Garden. Yeah, all that fighting Fair Garden, Blanche Hill and so forth over a stalk of corn. That's what it was all about. Like we just mentioned, there was about 40 to 45,000 troops here in this area from late November, early December, all the way through April. Men and horses have to eat, and a lot of these troops were cavalry, plus you had artillery for the horses, supply wagons, so there's a lot of horse flesh in the area at that time, not to mention 40-some thousand people. So, corn was the staple in those days, both for humans and livestock. I grew up on a small farm myself, so I know about growing corn. We used to shock it. But back then, what they probably did was they'd cut the top out of it just above the ear and tie it together, take it in, and then they'd strip all the fodder off the rest of the stalk, also gather the corn in. So that's what these Confederates, they had started doing. They started going across the river. They found out there was a lot of corn in them Pigeon River bottoms over there in Sevier County. So, Sturgis heads up the river on the south side, and let's see, 26 back up there to the 23rd or 24th, he finds some Confederate foragers. They killed a couple of them, captured the wagons, captured the rest of the men. They had some guards with them that were infantrymen, so they assumed they was infantry fairly close by. Sturgis also finds out that Longstreet has dispatched Micah Jenkins with his division of infantry to make sure that the Union has retreated back to Knoxville, and also to kind of feel out the situation to see if he ought to go back and try to retake Knoxville. So Sturgis is starting to get scared now. He's afraid he's got infantry in his rear, Confederate infantry that could trap him. So he starts going kind of cautious after that. Longstreet hears that he's over on that side of the river and says, we need that corn. We got to feed all these animals. He tells Martin to go over there and chase them out. Major General Martin, Confederate, he was commanding Wheeler's old cavalry corps. Wheeler was wounded in Chickamauga, so Martin was breveted to take his place, so he got recuperated. And so he crosses the river. He takes 2 brigades with him, that's all. One Armstrong Brigade and Morgan's Brigade. And he comes across the river, and on the 26th, he runs into Wofford, General Wofford, who is a division commander, cavalry commander under Sturgis. I don't know how much y'all have read, studied on this, but at Flat Creek, Wofford, poor old Wofford, he had a rough time along about then. He almost got captured in the Battle of Dandridge, just about surrounded and barely got out of it himself. Lost a lot of people there, a lot of men. Then he gets over here and he gets out in front of Sturgis's main force, and Martin hits him hard. He runs back as far across his Middle Creek and catches up with Sturgis's main body. He loses quite a few men along the way, and so Sturgis's force goes into night quarters there, about just a few miles out of Sevier. Martin, he thinks, well, we got this situation under control. He sends Armstrong's brigade back to the rear, act as a reserve. The next day, he sends Morgan's brigade forward, and then that's when they get hit the next morning with Sturgis's whole force. Eli Lilly, he goes around him, and I think it was either Campbell or LaGrange, one of the brigade commanders. They go around to the left and do a flanking movement around the hill, and they just about captured Martin. He just got out there just in time. So they're backing up. They crossed the Middle Creek. They're at Fair Gardens now. They try to establish a line of defense at Fair Garden Crossroads, and they get overrun. They start retreating again, and then you have this cavalry action where the cavalry rides into them with sabers. That's written on one of these plaques around here. And so they really, pell-mell just get the heck out of there. I mean, I would too if I had a saber slashing at my back. So Martin's troops are pretty much licked. They're dispersed. Well, it's actually Morgan's troops, Morgan's brigade. And Martin was almost captured. He barely escaped. Well, night falls. That saves him. Sturgis pulls back. And meantime, a courier's headed back across the river to tell Longstreet what's going on. Longstreet has come from Russellville down to Dandridge to kind of keep an eye on the situation now. And so he hears what a licking that Martin got that day before. And so he sends Bushrod Johnson, tells him to cross the river and save him. Well, Bushrod comes across the river himself at late that evening after dark, gets up with Colonel Tribble, who is Armstrong's brigade commander that's on this side of the river with Martin. And he says, well, I'm going to hold my troops back right now. He said, what I want you to do in the morning, he said, tonight you go build you some good defenses back up here on these ridges, back up next to the river. And he said, then you send one of your regiments forward and lure Sturgis's command to chasing them, and then I'll slip in behind them and say, well, we'll have them trapped. And it almost worked. The thing that kept it from working, poor old Walford again, he gets way out ahead. Well, Walford fell for the trap the next morning. That's exactly what they did. Tribble's, he only had 3 regiments with him. He had 1,000 men, roughly, which is supposed to be a brigade, but it was, by this point of the war, brigades were the size of regiments, regiments were the size sometimes of companies. So they go back up on those ridges. It'd be off to the left of the Newport Road, the old Newport Highway on this side of the river. Near, at that time, it was Hayes Ferry, I think it was, where you cross. All that's underwater now. But they get up on those ridges, and they set up some good defenses. They work all night. They even built some fires to work by, and they build up good log walls to hide behind with entrenchments and so forth up on the ridge. Well, next morning, they send the 4th Tennessee. By the way, he had 3 Tennessee regiments. That's why it was drilled. He sends the 4th Tennessee forward. Walford's in front again. Well, he takes off after them. They start falling back, and then they fall back a little faster, and it just gets better and better. And Walford, he cuts loose after him, and he's got a whole division now. Well, it's a light division. He had probably 2,000-3,000 men. I forget the exact number. So he takes off chasing this regiment. Well, meanwhile, Sturgis has spread his people out. He's got some going around to the right, some to the left. And he's with the group on the left going up the river. What they're doing is trying to round up Martin and his stragglers from the day before when they got run out of Fair Garden. Well, they happened to spy Bushrod Johnson crossing his infantry across the river, and realized they were just about to fall into a trap. Well, he sends a courier after Walford to tell him to come back, and it's too late. He done got too far ahead of them, and he falls for the trap. The 4th Tennessee runs right through the entrenchments they got set up in the barricades. Walford's right behind him, and as soon as they're mounted, they're cavalry. As soon as they get through, they jump off the horses, grab their rifles, and when Walford gets there, they cut loose on him. Well, he falls back. He sends a major with one or two companies around to the left, and they try to scale that steep ridge and come up on their left flank. They get mowed down. But anyway, this area is called Blant's Hill, B-L-A-N-T-S, apostrophe S. It also got renamed Mini Ball Hill. David Smith, anybody know him? Historian over here. Done a lot of relic hunting with his metal detector. Yeah, he has found a bunch of mini balls over there on that hill. And anyway, they got sorely licked. Lost a lot of people. Final tally was for the whole 3-day event was, I think it was 400 federal casualties and 370 Confederate casualties. Most of those 370 was on the 27th when Martin got mauled so bad. So it tells you most of the federal casualties was Blant's Hill. That's right here in the northern part of Sevier County, just before you cross the river, just this side of the river. It's about what's now the Jefferson County line, right along in there, be just west of Chestnut Hill. Chestnut Hill's Jefferson County, so they might have been in Jefferson County. Dandridge, of course, is, and they went 2 miles probably out of Dandridge. Okay. Finally, the courier gets up with Wofford after he's already just about had his whole command wiped out. They skedaddle back to Sturgis, and they keep getting up. They spent the night in Sevierville, took a brief rest, and then left out in the middle of the night and headed toward Maryville because he didn't want to go back the way he came. He was afraid Micah Jenkins might catch him trying to get back into Knoxville. He goes all the way to Maryville and then back into Knoxville. So that ended that 3-day event. And most historical accounts of Fair Garden identified as a 1-day battle and a big Union victory, which it was, but it was actually a 3-day engagement. After the 28th, there were no Union troops in the valley, west of above Knoxville. So on up until that spring, April, Longstreet pulls out, goes back to Virginia, gets there just in time to help lead with the Battle of the Wilderness. And for the rest of the spring, the Confederates owned the upper part of the valley here. Now, is that about what you wanted to hear? Okay, questions? Anything? I noticed there was some statistics back here on one of these displays about the Unionist support here in East Tennessee. Sevier County was the most Union sympathizing county in the state. It only went about 4% for secession, during the secession vote. Yes, sir.
Sturgis, South Dakota, named after him.
Yep, sure is. Yeah, after the war, he went out there and fought Sioux.
Okay.
Yeah, Sherman and Sheridan, they were just warming up and, going through Atlanta and Columbia and Shenandoah Valley. They were just getting warmed up for what they did to the Sioux.
Didn't Sheridan go to Bridge to Nowhere or something?
Yeah, this was good. Thank you for that question. Sheridan, during the Battle of Dandridge, Sturgis got worried that he might get trapped there. No retreat path. And so Sheridan is commanding at that time a combined infantry and cavalry force. He tells them build him a pontoon bridge out the back way across the river so he can have an escape route. Well, the fog sets in, and Sheridan can see land over there. And so he builds that pontoon bridge across to that land. Well, it wasn't very wide. He was a little bit puzzled with that. Well, he got over there on that land and realized he was just on an island. And the biggest part of the river was on the other side of it. And he didn't have time to finish the pontoon bridge, so it never got built the rest of the way. Yep. Yeah, they got out that night of the 28th, the 19th, yeah, morning of the 19th, they left out before, which Longstreet wasn't going to attack them, he was going to let them attack him. So, yeah, they had Walford again, bless his heart. They had him in the most forward position, kind of along the ridge, and had him build up big fires to keep them going all night while the rest of them slipped back up toward Mossy Creek, and then he was the last to pull out. So Longstreet thought they were still there. Next morning, he was expecting an assault. It didn't come. About the middle of the morning, he figured, well, we better go see what's going on here. So they eased down toward Dandridge and find out it's empty. Yes, sir.
Bill, would you tell us a little bit about what this time was like for the average family that lived here? Just the average resident of Cobb and Sevier, Blount County.
Well, most of the people in this area, they didn't figure they had a problem in this life. They considered it a rich man's war. Most of them were just subsistence farmers, barely making a living. They didn't have slaves. And basically the war was it was a fight between the plantation owners in the south and the industrialists in the north. You know, tariffs was a big issue. The south was paying, the Morrill tariff that was about to pass Congress before South Carolina seceded, and Lincoln had already endorsed it. It was going to jack the rates up to 37%, and then in 3 years increase it to 47%. Which had to put the South paying 80-some% of the federal revenue. And a lot of that revenue was intended to build the Transcontinental Railroad. It wasn't going to go through a single southern state. So the people back up here in the mountains, you know, they figured, they considered it a flatland before. They didn't have any use for it. You didn't get a lot of volunteering out of the men up here in the mountains. Then in '62, when the Confederacy started drafting, conscripting people, that's when a lot of the locals in this area joined the Union Army. When they didn't want to fight to start with, but then if they was going to have to fight, they figured they'd fight on the Union side. I mean, Cobb County, it was about, we had about 800 Confederate soldiers, and about 600 went to the Union. But then you had a couple of hundred of those 800 Confederate soldiers deserted and came home. A lot of them were paroled at Vicksburg, and they just, you know, they came home, didn't re-enlist anywhere. A lot of raiding. People in this area lived hard during the war. You had bushwhackers. It was probably the most lawless time in this country, particularly in the southern United States, that you've ever seen. Even down where I live, in Gaston County, which was, you know, almost 100% pro-Confederate. Gaston County, North Carolina. I've read accounts, newspaper accounts and so forth about the stealing and plunder and so forth. See, all the men were away. They were fighting. In this area, they were in one arm or the other. And so the folks didn't have anybody to defend them. And you had these outliers, draft dodgers, what we called them in our day, was Vietnam. And so you had these outliers that would raid them. And you had some that were Confederate, you had some that were Union, and then you had some that they didn't want either side, they just were themselves. You had Kirk's Raiders, which was a Union, well, they were about battalion size, I guess. I don't think he ever had a full regiment, but 300-400 men. Kirk came down out of Kentucky, and he started out in the Confederate Army. He enlisted in the Confederate Army. 61. He didn't stay but a couple of months, deserted, and joined the Union Army and became what's it called? Anyway, he would guide people north to join the Union Army. He was from Green, George Washington Kirk. Probably a lot of us have heard of him. Yes, sir.
Can you tell us a little bit about your upcoming book?
Well, it's pretty much what I just told you. It's about the war in East Tennessee, in this part of East Tennessee. It's a collaboration, myself and Mike Williams, another member of our camp. He came up with the idea of writing this book to raise money for a camp. Actually, we signed our royalties over to the camp. We'll probably, when the book comes out, we'll buy up some for the camp to sell to festivals and so forth. So we're not getting anything out of it. It's Arcadia Publishing Company. If anybody's familiar with their books, they're picture books written. Matter of fact, I didn't realize that when Mike asked me to write the text for it, so I wrote like 21,000 words or so. Found out that I was way over. I think they've already cut out 7,000 or 8,000 words. Mike provided the pictures. That was his part of the deal. He provided the pictures. I provided the text. Just used as introductions, I think, in each of the chapters. But that's supposed to be coming out in January. I've just missed a conference call this past week with the publisher, so I'm still not real sure when the publishing date is going to be. Well, I had called it the War Between the States and East Central Tennessee. They renamed it Civil War Comes to East Tennessee, I think. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm doing a little bit of research on one of my relatives in Wayne County during the beginning of Civil War. And what I find is that they evidently took attendance once a month or so of each person there.
Roster. Yep.
And he would show up quite a few times as AWOL.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one person explain that they would leave when battle was low and go back and farm, and then go back to the company. Is that true?
That's
Is
true.
that why they would be AWOL?
That's true. Well, there were several reasons. Sometimes they could have been captured, being a BOW camp somewhere, but in your case, it sounds like it, yeah, back and forth. Yeah, the battle will be over, go home, plant a crop, and then come back to report to duty. Yep. He must have been in the Army of Tennessee.
Well, it was Meigs County.
Okay.
It was, I believe
Yep.
it was Calvary.
So he wasn't too far away from the battlefields then. Most likely he was in the Army of the Confederate Army.
He was from there, yes.
Okay, if he was in the Confederate Army of Tennessee, then he probably wasn't all that far from home during much of the war. And my folks from North Carolina, and they were up in Virginia during the war. I had a great-grandfather that enlisted in June of '61, and as best I could tell, he never came home until he got paroled out of Elmira prison camp in August of '65. He was hard-headed. He wouldn't take the oath, and they finally were going to close the prison camp down and just kicked him out. Any other questions?
One last question.
We can talk about anything. It'll make any difference to me.
Well, I think they must be through.
Well, at this time, we'd like for you to hang around a few minutes, and we're going to take us, what, 5 minutes or 3 or 5 minutes to get set up back there? And then, while we're in the process of doing this, I think we'll go ahead and ask for someone to
Jim, right on.
we accept our new bylaws. Anyone to give us we need, don't we need the acceptance of this? So let's, anyone recommend that we accept the new bylaws? Ready to do that?
I move that we accept the bylaws.
Second.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, move the second. Are there any quick questions? Let me give an overview of what those changes consisted of. I mentioned a little bit earlier, but primarily we took out some board members like a librarian. We really needed a webmaster. And so we made that position much more technical and gave that person quite a bit more responsibility related to maintaining what we now have digitally and increasing that and making it more user-friendly. So that's the reason for that change. Another major thing we did was create a method in which we could rotate through the board of directors so we didn't at one time have a whole new group of officers. So that we had about 2/3 of those remaining officers stay in place each 2 or 3 on a 3-year rotating basis. And that was just for the strength and organization and management of the organization. And aside from that, you'll find technical changes that really updated 25-year-old language or maybe was a little more specific than the language had been before, but really didn't change the running of the organization. Jim, you were very active, or really most active in that, in editing those changes. Would you add anything to that?
Well, it was done by about 5 people, including yourself and me. The other big thing is we continue to have a problem with individuals volunteering to serve on our board of directors. And so there was a problem that we solved where we might, in fact, end up with a lack of a quorum. And so now we've got the ability to address that issue with of course, we'd love to have every seat filled, but from time to time that doesn't happen. And in fact, I believe we have some openings now. So be careful, don't stick around too long, or raise your hand to get a cookie because you may find that you're volunteering. Associated with the calendar change in electing officers, it got to the fact that it wasn't clear whose term was up. And so one of the big things we did was there's now a calendar that continues to rotate, so we will always know 10 years from now who will be elected. And so there'll be an election every year in November, or for 3 or so officers. That's about it. Well, it also established additional duties for the treasurer. In addition to just telling you that, hey, we've got enough money that we can all make a trip to Bermuda, we do a little bit better job of reporting those funds. So, any questions? If you have any questions later, and oh, by the way, after this is approved, our Constitution and bylaws will be posted on our website.
Well, Gil, just want to show of hands. But at this time, I'd like to have a show of hands. All in favor of adopting the changes to the bylaws? Would you please raise your hand? Are those opposed? Okay, it was unanimously accepted. And the only other thing we would like to do is have an election for 3 positions, but we do not have a person for the Blount County Director. So if you are from Blount County and would like to help serve this organization, you would be very welcome. So that's, do we have any nominations for that? Anyone? No? Blount County not serving now? I'll look at some of these folks I know in other organizations. See if I can pull out.
Here's the slate of officers. We have ballots and slate of officers. Larry Fox is nominated for Sevier County Vice President. Larry is currently in that role and will continue to
serve this organization again as long as Jim Schuler has a role.
Right. Of course, Body Secretary is Ellen Landy. That's a unique role as well. And our webmaster, Jim Everhart, who is the body, not the soul of So these will be available for you. If you would just take one, write somebody's name in if you want, write your own name, and then we'll collect these ballots at the back table, and put them on the back table. We'll have a container or something there. An additional announcement or two. We do have a couple of the journals where basically this story was told. That was the summer, fall 2016 edition, which is here. If anyone did not get a copy of the June or the summer journal, I have a few spare copies here. If you'll see me, I'll set you up with one of those. And you didn't ask April when she was going to issue the fall journal. I didn't hear you.
No, I didn't, and I wasn't. Pardon me?
It's prompting me. It's being worked on. Anybody who wants to do it, they can have a public statement. Put on a poster review or about family history. We had an article that Phyllis wrote a month ago, and it was about some papers she found going to her father's thing. And it was her family back in 1840, and it was the tax receipts. And, you know, it might be 60 cents for 1 year, but to them, that was a lot of money. And it also said you could fulfill with money, work, or goods, like chicken, something like that. So it was really interesting.
And then don't forget, there is an exhibit behind us that's sort of self-guided that will back up some of the information that's presented in our excellent program.
All right, and so we will make those ballots available, again, on the back table and something to put them in. We appreciate you taking just a little bit of time during this refreshment time on voting for these officers, just so we are, this is going to be a legitimate, well-run organization. And nothing else said, again, let's thank those that brought our treats, and now let's go ahead. Thank
More units of the
There's a sign-up sheet here, we'd like you to do that.
Plus, no.
Well, and they
You familiar with Parson Brownlow?
a little bit.
He was pro-slave. He hated abolition, but he was strongly against secession. I mean, he hated what he called the secessionists, the Confederates. So a lot of them were just so pro keeping the Union together.
I know there was a lot of that, well, like, even going the other way, like Andrew Johnson. He was against slavery, but he was against splitting the Union up. So I know there was a lot of that, but I was just wondering, I mean,
You know that-
when you mentioned that, if there was any other real noteworthy reason that I'm not aware of besides those.
It's interesting, in the June convention, the East Tennessee bloc voting for and against secession. The difference in slave ownership between the secessionists and the Unionists, 1%.
That's,
That goes to show slavery wasn't reason.
yeah, I understood that. Yeah, I was, I was just curious. I appreciate your answer.
Oh,
Thank you
absolutely.
again. A lot of great information.
Well, thank you. Some of them do. I'm not into it myself.
We want our own trails.
We don't have anybody in our camp right now that does. Danny Butler used to years ago. I think he's still in our camp. I'm not sure if he's beat up or not. But, he personified Stonewall Jackson. But he used to do reenactments. But other than that, no, we don't have any reenactments. Now, up in the Tri-Cities area, there's 5 camps up in there, and they're real big into it. The Battle of Bluntville and some of the other battles took place up in Blue Springs. Greenville camp there, yeah, they get into that.
Stagecoach Preservation Association. Museum in Maryland.
Uh-huh.
And in April, we have called Civil War Camp.
Uh-huh.
In the past, there's been a few skirmishes, but a lot of times we have had one guy, he's actually learned, he sets up a medical team.
Oh, I bet that's neat.
Body parts laying out, the old tools.
Yeah? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm sure he had a bone saw.
Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
That's how they solved a lot of those problems, just saw it all.
A lot of them, older, they can't do it anymore, so they pass off, you know.
Yeah, we don't.
So,
I guess the SCB's like a lot of organizations, a lot of civic organizations. It's pretty big young people. If they got a job.
Great looking food over here. I hate to.
Yeah, and if they don't have a job, they can't afford to do it.
and then a lot of grandparents take care of their kids, you know.
Yep, yep.
Bring them on. They say, well, they don't want to go. Well, our kid, you're going.